We are live on stage 11 of the Giro d'Italia, the longest stage of the race this year, and a five-man breakaway has a lead of only 2.5 minutes with still almost 87 kilometers left to go. Steve Schlanger alongside Todd Gogolski. There is a new race leader coming into stage number 11, Joaquim Rodriguez of Katusha, coming off his first ever Giro d'Italia stage win yesterday as we hit the halfway point of the season's first Grand Tour here today.
A big day in the saddle awaits the guys today. 160 miles. It's been lengthened by just a couple of miles today. No major climbs whatsoever. A third category climb in the middle of the race, which they've already gone over. Mostly flat roads to the finish, except for one short, not too difficult climb in the final 13 kilometers of the race. Probably will be a field sprint.
The 5 leaders, no threat on the general classification. But the top GC riders are all in the peloton near the front right now, and many of the marquee names that we've been highlighting since the start of the Giro, they are all within 1.5 minutes of Joaquim Rodriguez, who now wears the Maglia Rosa. So this thing still very wide open as we move into the second half of the race.
And all those guys sitting in the peloton, not worried at all about the breakaway up the road with so many kilometers and miles to get to the finish. That gap is nowhere near big enough for that breakaway to stay away.
So 2:43 is the margin. 85K left to go. A sunny, warm day in Italy with stage 11 now underway. Stage number 11 of the 95th edition of the Giro d'Italia, starting in yesterday's finish town of Assisi as we hit the midpoint of the season's first Grand Tour with our 5th leader of the race in Joaquim Rodriguez.
Huge, long day in the saddle for the guys, but still look like it will come down to a finish of a big bunch sprint.
The longest stage of the race, 258 kilometers. It's been lengthened because of the way they have to navigate through a couple of towns today, as overall it will head northwest into Tuscany for the first time.
160 miles, a massive day in the saddle for the guys, but relatively flat, in fact quite flat compared to most days. They've already been over the Category 3 climb in the middle of the stage. They still have a very small Category 4 climb in the last 13 kilometers, and then it'll get together for a bunch finish, most likely.
There is a circuit at the finish of 14.4 kilometers and a small climb on that finishing circuit that could really make it tricky for the sprinters and potentially some kind of a breakaway late in the stage. Now we're at the back of the field. That is just over 3 minutes back of a 5-man breakaway with 82K left to go. The pink line shows you where the racers are, having already gone over the Cat 3, but still a long way to go to the finish of today's 11th day of racing.
And a lot of people wondering just exactly what that final climb will do. It's got a maximum of 8%. It's fairly short. It tops out just 11K from the finish. That's under 7 miles. But the descent is pretty wide open. I think it's going to give most sprinters a chance to get back on, and I think we're going to see a big group contesting the finish today.
With Rodriguez winning on stage 10 yesterday, we have now had 8 different teams win a stage. Rodriguez is our 5th different leader, but it's still very tight. At the top of the general classification, the box office names that we highlighted coming into this race are still very much in contention. Rodriguez leading the former pink jersey holder Ryder Hesjedal by 17 seconds, but look at the names lined up behind them, still within 1 minute, and really, you have about a half dozen legitimate contenders all within 1/11 of the pink jersey right now as we move into the second half of the race. Jersey of Joaquim Rodriguez in the middle of the screen, number 111 for Katusha. Rodriguez, with the uphill finish yesterday, everybody knew it was perfectly suited for his skills, and it was one that his team director said that he had to be patient. He had to wait, not launch his sprint too soon, so he did wait until the final 200 meters, then launched that decisive attack that got him the stage win and the race lead.
There's no doubt on an uphill finish like yesterday, if you go too early, you will blow yourself up in spectacular fashion, but Rodriguez is the best finisher in the business on that type of terrain, and no surprise that he got the win.
This is Team Sky in the dark colors, and There is Mark Cavendish in the rainbow jersey. He's already won 2 Giro d'Italia stages in the first half of this year's race, and we could see a sprint finish where Cavendish tries to go for the hat trick today, as it sets up for a possible sprint at the end. And now back to our breakaway riders, who are over 3 minutes up the road with still 80 kilometers left to go. So I don't think the peloton is all that concerned at this point. There is plenty of time to reel these boys back in. Better to let them bake and marinate out in the sun for a while. And these guys probably realizing at this point just what they've done by going ahead so soon in the race and still so far to go.
Olivier Kaizen on the front there, not even really setting a wicked tempo at all. In fact, they're riding very much within themselves, as he's been in some moves in the past, and all those guys have a long, long road in front of them today.
To give you some perspective on how long today's stage is, at 258 kilometers, it is longer than Paris-Roubaix, one of the biggest single-day races in the sport of professional cycling, one of the hardest races because of the distance, because of the terrain, and the way guys just compete at that race. But that's a one-off. That's just a one-day event, while this is in the middle of a 3-week race. So consider all of those circumstances. It's going to be tough today.
Well, and this race will be very different. No cobblestones, which is what makes Paris-Roubaix so famous. And also, because this is the middle of a stage race, it is not ridden full throttle like Paris-Roubaix. You have to be able to race tomorrow and the next day and next week. And so guys will play it very strategically different than a one-day classic like Paris-Roubaix.
And on the other hand, too, you already have 10 days of racing in your legs, some hard climbs, so there is some fatigue building up physically and mentally that guys are bringing into a long stage like this as well.
And no doubt about that, Steve. Guys, all that gets put into the hopper every day, and it gets mixed around with their strategy for the day, as well as how their body is feeling and their mind is.
So Rabobank and Team Sky riding at the front of this field right now, as the gap has come down under 3 minutes. Its largest point was about 4.5, so they never got much leash to work with from the outset of today, and it's remained pretty steady between 2.5 and 3 minutes for a while now. Kilometers left to go. Stage 11, 5-man breakaway. Adrian Saez of the Euskaltel team, Stefan Denefel, the Austrian from Bacon Soleil, Manuele Boraro of Saxo Bank, Olivier Kaizen riding his 4th consecutive Giro d'Italia for the Lotto Belisol team, and Michael Delage of Française des Jeux. This is the back of the field that is just over 2 minutes behind a 5-man breakaway, with 72.5 kilometers left to go on stage 11 of the Giro d'Italia. The race moving past its halfway point today, and the hardest part of the race still to come in the final week. But as far as today, in this very long stage, they've gone over the Category 3. They have a lot of flat road to go before that final tricky bump inside the final 15K that could shake up the sprinters' chances for a stage win today. We'll have to see how that plays into the overall finale.
Yeah, that final climb is just under 2 miles in length. It has a little 8% pitch maximum, averages 5%, but it's far enough from the finish that I think the sprinters that get in trouble on the climb will get back on. It's just under 7 miles from the top to the finish line. So I still think we're going to see a big bunch finish with pretty much all the fast guys in it.
The gap has come down under 2 minutes. As they close in on the final 70 kilometers of racing, they've already been out on the bike for over 5 hours today. Adrian Saez, Stefan Denefel, Manuele Boraro, Olivier Kaizen, and Michael Delage. Our 5 leaders, no long-term threats on the general classification, and a lead of just under 2 minutes.
Denefel, in fact, the highest placed guy overall, almost 42 minutes down in the general classification.
Here is the general classification. Now after 10 days of racing, Joaquim Rodriguez, our 5th different leader. Former leader Ryder Hesjedal slips to 2nd now at 17 seconds behind. Those top 6, though, still all within 1 minute of the pink jersey. So the top names coming into this year's Giro, who we figured would battle for the GC, they're still all very much in contention. At the front of the field, Rabobank and Team Sky. Sky in the dark colors, riding for Mark Cavendish, who's there on the left-hand side of the screen in the rainbow jersey. Cav has already won 2 Giro stages in this year's race and riding over roads that he knows quite well today, as the race will go through an area that is close to one of Cav's homes in Tuscany. Also has a home on the Isle of Man and in London, and spends time training in Tuscany, loves racing in Italy, be it the Giro or other races. And as the Giro rolls into Tuscany for the first time today, in Cervia today, Cav going over training roads and close to one of his houses.
Should be a day that he definitely wants to win, being in that rainbow jersey as well. He's been very motivated this year with several very important wins, and a couple of those coming at this year's Giro d'Italia right after the birth of his daughter, Delilah.
Well, the last time that the Giro d'Italia finished in today's finish town of Montecatini Terme, it was back in 2003, and Mario Cipollini, one of the greatest sprinters of all time, won that stage in the rainbow jersey as the defending world champion. So Cavendish trying to make it 2 for 2 for the rainbow jersey, winning in Montecatini Terme today.
I think he's certainly my favorite for the stage win, although Goss has shown that he and his Orica Green Edge team are up to the challenge to try to topple Cavendish. But so far, Cavendish has really shown he's the man to beat, other than stage 3 when he crashed and Goss won, and then a couple of days ago as well when Francisco Ventoso won and both Goss and Cavendish were on the ground.
Under 70K now, under 2 minutes to our 5 leaders. Very tricky finish, however. There's a circuit at the end of 14.4 kilometers and what is a Cat 4 climb on that finishing circuit that summits with 11K left to go. The climb is just over 3K long. And then once they come down into the final K of racing, several very technical corners. They have a 90-degree left-hander at 700 meters to the line, more than a 90-degree right-hander at 400 meters. And Gogo, we've already seen how the corners in the final kilometer have impacted the sprints to this point with a lot of crashes. So more corners today, so that could really shake things up once again.
And it could, but you may think this a little strange, but I think today is actually going to be safer because there are multiple corners, which means it will string the guys out and they won't come into one final corner at breakneck speed all side by side. It will be a big line because they also have another right-hand corner at 1,000 meters. So in the final K, 3 sharp turns, that will string it out as long as a team has their train ramped up at the front.
Do you also think that the crashes will play psychologically in the backs of the minds of guys who are contesting the sprint, thinking about maybe being more conservative or approaching it from a different strategic point of view?
Yes, and unfortunately for the sprinters, they have to deal in what is really the most dangerous part of the sport. The field sprints are very hectic on a good day, and they're treacherous on a bad day. So they have to both use the past to be safer, but also put it out of their mind to do their job and go full on.
And beyond that, how about a chance that the sprinters don't even get to contest the stage win, that final climb and the circuit may disrupt their chances and allow somebody else, perhaps a surprise, to win the stage?
I think if this stage were shorter, the sprinters would all be there. But because it's such an incredibly long day at 160 miles, that hill may take enough out of some sprinters' legs that they can't get back on, or if they do, that they don't have enough speed left. So it's definitely a little bit of a question mark day. Even a lot of guys who are from the southern part of the country have moved north. Giovanni Visconti, Vincenzo Nibali, who's not in the race. Those guys have chosen to move up into the northern part of Italy.
A lot of riders will tell you that as you look at Ivan Basso on the left-hand side of the screen in the green and white for Liquigas Cannondale, a lot of riders will say that the most beautiful riding that they do anywhere in the entire world is in Tuscany. Even non-Italians say that.
And these Liquid Gas Cannondale guys will say thank you to their teammate Valerio Agnoli for bringing up the bottles, because somebody's got to do it, and they're going to go through 10 bottles today, maybe more.
That's not even a mountainous stage.
Nope, it's just a long day. Lucky for the guys, not very hot today, so that will make it a little bit easier on the hydration side of things.
Now the weather has been just about picture perfect. A couple of spot showers in the first half of the race, but this is by and large what they have experienced. Sunny, clear skies, warm temperatures, and a lot of rolling terrain, and not a lot of flat areas for the riders to negotiate so far.
And also because the peloton is taking it so easy, gives guys a chance to maybe look around at some of the gorgeous scenery just a little bit. Still hard to do that in the peloton, but if you're on the edge or the back, you can glance around just a little bit.
Liquid Gas Cannondale has remained close to the front behind Rabobank and just ahead of Katusha and the pink jersey of Joaquim Rodriguez.
Well, there's definitely no question what the intentions of Team Sky are. They've had men on the front ever since we came on the air today, riding for Mark Cavendish. A bit of a logjam here, and thankfully it looks like nobody going down. But when the road narrows out, you get some barriers and obstacles in these corners, well, you can get into some dicey situations in the peloton.
Now the Tifosi are a special kind of cycling fan, and some say there are no more passionate fans in the sport than in Tuscany. And we will certainly see them today closer to the finish in the final week on the big signature and iconic climbs. And there are some iconic climbs to come in the Alps and the Dolomites. This race building over the first couple of weeks to what they hope to be a climax in the final week, and that's a departure from what we saw last year at the Giro, where so many mountains came early on. And this year's race, now that we're at the halfway point, has gone pretty much according to form for what the organizers wanted. Last year by this time, Alberto Contador had basically wrapped it up. He had a lead of several minutes, and everybody knew he was going to ride away with the win. But this year, all of the marquee names are within 90 seconds of the lead at the halfway point, so it's still anybody's game going to the second half of the race.
And these promoters, I mean, Michele Acquarone, who is the director of the team, after they got rid of Angelo Zolmagnon from last year, they just said, look, Angelo, you know, you've done some great things with the race over the last handful of years, but this year was over the top, that year being 2011. Riders were complaining about how severe it was, and it really was. But Acquarone has done a great job of balancing things out. I'll tell you what, the final weekend is going to be brutal, however.
They're trying to make this race more popular, and they would like to, at some point, compete with the Tour de France, which, of course, is the biggest race in the entire world, as the riders come up on Empoli now. And Acquarone, the new director, said that the only way to gain on the Tour de France is you got to take the race to the consumers. You got to make it more global and reach an audience around the world. In fact, he told a story of going to Edvald Boassenhagen, who had won a stage a few years ago, back in 2009, and then he saw him shortly after that and said, are you going to come back to the Giro? Are you going to continue racing in Italy? And he said that he wasn't sure, so Acquarone asked him why, and he said, it's really because of the Tour de France. That was the race that I grew up watching on TV. It's the race I always wanted to win. And so Acquarone knew that you have to take it to the masses and make it popular through various social mediums, be it TV or social media, whatever the case may be. And that's the way you get riders growing up watching a race and wanting to win it.
Yeah, these guys navigating town here right now, big crowds out, and this is exactly what they're looking for. This excitement, this thrill of bike racing. And Acquarone and his crew have done a great job with social media and the jerseys now. The pink jersey has tweets around the sleeve cuffs as well as the bottom of the torso from past winners and luminaries of the sport, as well as from spectators. They picked them up last year. They put them on the jerseys. They're really involving people in unique ways.
And they're also including people in picking out the course for the race, too. They went on Facebook and got suggestions from fans on which climbs to include in the final week.
And they could have even learned some climbs that they haven't known about in the past. So they go check those out. They say, can we work our route to fit in some of these climbs with the cities we want? It's a huge undertaking to orchestrate just the route of the race every year, let alone putting the race on.
Now the field coming through town now, under a minute behind our 5 leaders. Just over 50K left to go now.
Left side of the screen at the back, Jack Ballbridge just chilling out at the back for Orica Greenedge. The Australian time trial specialist. He's actually not doing much road racing this year. He's mostly preparing for his Olympic track events coming up.
A lot of the Aussies do both the track and the road races, so they have to make a decision at some point. All right, under a minute to the move and just over 50K left on stage 11 here at the Giro.
The tiniest little vehicles, 19 seconds. You can see the 5 guys still riding together there, all taking their poles.
And watch the field. Boy, they can see them. They're just right there. So they're going to bring them back, it looks like, maybe much sooner than you would expect, with 40K left to go.
We'll look for a little bit of chaos here if they bring these guys back. Maybe the breakaway will start to get more motivated now and stretch it back out.
As I mentioned, Leonardo, born in this town, the artist, scientist, mathematician. That's the thing. Back in those days, people did everything, Go-Go. It wasn't just one job. You were an astronomer, a mathematician, a scientist, a teacher.
This is where the term Renaissance man came from, huh?
We're lazy. We just have one job. 40K for the 5 leaders, but the field is going to be coming right under that banner behind him here.
Oh boy, it's a long way to go, and I just can only imagine with almost 40K to go and this breakaway basically almost caught. Lots of attacking now.
So we have Liquigas Cannondale in the green and white at the front and the middle. On the left-hand side of your screen in the dark colors, Team Sky for their sprinter Mark Cavendish. Liquigas Cannondale, however, riding for their GC man Ivan Basso, though they do have the sprinter Fabio Sabatini, who would be on his own in the sprint. And also in the 2 shades of blue on the left-hand side of the group now, that is Saxo Bank, the team of sprinter JJ Hayato. We got a top 3 earlier in a stage here at the race, and now on the right-hand side of the road with 3 teammates in front of him, the pink jersey of Joaquin Rodriguez as well.
And once again, everybody lined up with their teams. They're thinking about protecting their various interests, whether they're the sprinter or the general classification interests. And then there are other guys up there that really are looking to factor in just sort of on the wild chance that they can put a guy on the podium in a finale.
Still no sure thing that it's going to come down to a sprint, even with the breakaway about to be caught, because we have that one climb on the finishing circuit. We have those technical corners in the final kilometer of racing. But more often than not, when a stage has finished in Montecatini Terme, it has been the sprinters who have won the race. So if history is any indication, today should come down to some kind of a sprint. It's the 13th time in Giro history that Montecatini Terme has hosted a stage finish of the Giro, and that actually ties a record for cities that are not province capitals to host a stage finish of Italy's Grand Tour. First time was back in 1931, and most recently in 2003 when Mario Cipollini won in the rainbow jersey.
Well, that gap picking up just a little bit for the break because the field really doesn't want to catch them. But let's talk about that sprinting dynamic, Steve. You know, there's been some discussion with Goss and Cavendish saying that the sprints are more of a free-for-all as they are now 6 hours in the saddle. But back across the pond at the Tour of California, the director for Omega Pharma Quickstep Brian Holm, he was asked about whether or not there's less respect in the leadouts because HTC High Road, the American team, is now not together, and he said no. As far as he's concerned, nothing has changed. So everybody has a little bit of a different perspective on this. It's not black and white.
Even from rider to rider, they seem to see things differently because Cavendish feels there is less respect. And Matt Goss was saying before the stage today that it's really something that evolves from sprint to sprint. Sometimes it's different one day than it is the next or the day before.
And that's the opinion I agree most with. I mean, there is a general sort of history, and there's a general rule that plays out. One team will take control and they'll try and deliver their sprinter. But everybody else wants a piece of the action too. And so you never know what's going to happen, and you have to be able to adapt on the fly. Unfortunately, that adapting on the fly sometimes leads to crashes in the final kilometers of the bike race.
So the peloton doesn't want to bring these guys back just yet. So the lead's still hovering right around 20 seconds with 37K remaining. We haven't seen any attacks from the breakaway. It's now come down to 13 seconds. They are just off the front, and the field looks like they're really riding here at the moment. No one team lined up at the front, really motoring along. Even though they're spread out somewhat, it seems like the pace is pretty high.
Yeah, it seems like we're starting to fight for a little bit of position here. And the gap coming down to 12 seconds now, so maybe they finally started to get a little bit sort of agitated in the field with the position fighting, and it may mean the end of the breakaway.
Again, Adrian says of Euskaltel, Stefan Denefol of Bacan Soleil, Manuel Boraro of Saxo Bank, Olivier Kaizen of Lado Belisol, and Miguel Delage of FDJ. They've been out there a long time today.
Interestingly, Kaizen just pulling off the front for Belisol. The Lado Belisol squad has been off the front prior to today, 210 miles. So after this breakaway, he will now be the man leading the, quote, breakaway standings, or the Fuga standings as it stands in the classification.
Come to a Grand Tour, there are a lot of different classifications.
Yeah, well, especially in Italy. There seem to be a lot of them in Italy, and it gives people something to go for. I mean, there are only a handful of guys who can really vie for the general classification. And then stages, of course, well, you got more options for that. But if you can be the breakaway guy, hey man, more power to you.
Adriano Malori, one of 5 guys who have worn the pink jersey at this year's race.
And he's obviously messing with his brake adjusting barrels there, so maybe having some issues. Malori, incidentally, the Italian national time trial champion last year, and Boaro here attacking out of the break is the guy who got second to Malori in Italian national time trial championship last year.
So finally our first attack from the breakaway that was just about to be caught. Boaro on the move with 30K to go.
So now he's throwing everything in for that most aggressive prize of the day. He knows all well and good that he cannot stay away from the field. Saez, the Euskaltel rider, in pursuit. The other guys kind of look like they sat up.
Saez trying to stay with him at the 30K banner. Finishing circuit of 14.4 kilometers with a small Cat 4 climb coming up at the end.
So 18.5 miles for the leaders of the bike race. The field just behind them, and there are the 3 other men. Looks like they pretty much said, you know what? Let's go sit in the field and talk with our teammates for a while.
Delage, Denefol, and Kaizen are going to be scooped up very shortly by the field. Matt Goss still at the back. A lot of his Arica Green Edge teammates are near the front, as are many of the other top sprinters. But Goss has been hovering near the back of the peloton. This is Boaro at the front of the race right now.
And sometimes it's okay to sit at the back like Gossi is right now, because it's not a critical moment of the bike race, and you can sit back there. The peloton is not as tightly bunched at the back. There's more breathing room, and it's just a little bit more relaxing. So we'll see if that's what Goss is up to a little bit later on, if he comes to the front and actually has an impact on the finish of this race, or if he doesn't and his body is really hurting him from that crash. Well, Boaro here really throwing down right now. He was second overall at the Circuit de la Sarthe in France earlier this year, and that race was largely settled by the individual time trial, which is Boaro's specialty. He got second in that time trial there as well.
So Saez trying to catch up to Boaro, who is attacked from the breakaway. He's at the front of the race right now with just under 30K left. Hot springs and spas. And after today's longest stage of the Giro, I think many of the riders will be thankful that they can just pop into one of those hot springs to relieve the pain on the 258-kilometer stage. 20K left for our leader with a 40-second lead on the peloton.
Good times alternate between the cold plunge and the warmth, but actually most of the guys really won't want to do the warmth for the reason that your muscles are already, they have micro tears and a little bit of swelling, so as much as it feels good to get that warmth, they'd be better off getting in some cold water, unfortunately. Now the staff, however, go knock yourself out in the warm water.
Sprightly pace now at the front of the field as they hit the 20K banner, just over a half a minute back of our leader, Manuele Boaro. Garmin Barracuda helping to lead the chase as they look to bring him back and set up the sprinters, although it will be a very technical run-in today in this finishing town. Now the Piazza Principale. And not many people taking in the espressos today, it looks like. They're all out alongside the road to welcome the Giro, I guess.
I think these guys get a little busy after the race comes through, but hey, you got the Giro coming through. You got an Italian off the front, 34 seconds advantage. He's been a junior time trial champion of his country as well, so he's going for it. And on the front, Team NetApp, second place yesterday with Huzarski, their Polish rider. They've exceeded all their expectations already in this year's race. Look at that, Perito sitting up there in about fourth or fifth wheel in the pink jersey.
Joaquin Rodriguez just trying to hang on and protect that race lead, making sure that nobody sneaks up the road the way he did a couple of days ago. And I'm not talking about the stage win yesterday. It was the day before that where he, I think, surprised some of the other GC riders and attacked in the final 10K, although it did not stick.
He surprised not only the other GC guys, but he surprised his team because his teammate Angel Vicioso was slated to attack, but Perito was on his wheel and he said, well, I'm here, I feel good, I'm going.
All right, here is Boaro, 4K away from the start of the finishing circuit in the finishing town of stage 11. Still a lead of almost half a minute. He caught a little while ago, and now he's our lone leader. His lead went up to over a minute at one point on the peloton, but now it's come down with just under 16K left to ride.
Well, now
arrows in here.
Yeah, now this is more reasonable of a time for the breakaway to be caught and not throw the peloton into total and utter chaos. If they had caught the entire breakaway with 30K to go, so many guys would have been going on the attack. But now the pace is high enough in the peloton, it's going to really sort of quelch a lot of those people thinking they can get away.
Mark Cavendish, third wheel. He's behind a teammate, and keep an eye on the road because since this is a circuit, they are getting a look at the run into the finish that they will face at the end of today's stage that will be very technical. Again, a 90-degree left-hand turn at 700 meters to the line, more than a 90-degree right-hand turn at 400 meters to the finish, and a slight uphill to the line itself. So this could be a critical preview for the stage finish as these riders roll into town.
And they're inside that final K now, so they're coming up on that left there, the one you were just talking about.
Watch this right-hander coming up and how much of a U-turn it almost is after 6.5 hours as they cross the finish line once before the end of the stage.
And the feeling from Manuele Boaro heading through the finish line here in front of all these Italian fans off of the front of the peloton of his home Grand Tour. It's got to be tremendous.
Here's that right-hand turn, and hey, here's a crash. That was Alex Rasmussen, the Dane for Garmin Barracuda, and that was at the left-hand turn at 700 meters to go, and again, this isn't even the end of the stage.
And here's that right-hander, so a lot of action in there at the finish, and it's going to be dicey, no doubt about it.
Field comes through, 11 seconds behind Boaro.
Attendiamo il passaggio della...
Now they are on the finishing circuit, and they will shortly start this climb of 3.3 kilometers that averages just over 5%, with a maximum of 8% coming with 12K left to go on the stage. And here is the early portion of that climb that Boaro was already on.
So they're inside of 9 miles to the finish. Look at how strung out the field is here. Boaro really feeling the pain in his legs now, looking back over the shoulders. But he's still got a lot to give. He is not really slowing down.
So keep an eye on the kilometer mark in the upper left-hand corner of your screen, as this is Rasmussen, who it looks like needs a new bike. He was involved in that issue around that corner at 700 meters from the finish line.
And at this point for him, it's time to realize that he probably will not make it back to the field, as Boaro is swept up under the impetus of Movistar at the front of the peloton.
The last surviving member of the day-long 5-man breakaway, and now this is the front of the race on stage 11. They are on the climb on the finishing circuit. With 12K to go, this climb hits its maximum of 8%. Then it goes downhill from 11K to just inside of 5K remaining before it flattens out, and then goes slightly back uphill in the final K to the finish. But this climb, that's rated as Category 4, tops out with exactly 11 kilometers left to go on the stage.
And that'd be just under 7 miles, about 6.8, as Orica Greenedge setting the tempo on the front. In fact, setting it so hard that the Liquid Gas guys letting them roll off a little bit.
Well, again, it's not a foregone conclusion. We're going to have a field sprint here. Other guys may use this as a springboard for an attack, and here comes another rider for Lotto Belisol up behind the Vacances Soleil and Orica Greenedge riders. Lotto Belisol had Olivier Kaizen in the break earlier today. They've been very active in breakaways throughout the Giro so far. And that is Dennis Van den Dert, the Belgian on the team, riding to the front for Lotto Belisol. 13K left, 2K of climbing still to go.
Long way to the finish, although these guys looking like they're pretty intent on trying to squeak out a bit of an advantage over the top, but they're going to need a pretty good advantage to stay in front of the peloton for 11 kilometers.
Yes. About 6K of a descent and then flattening out towards the finish.
Oh, here we go.
Get tangled up at the back.
That's what happens in these really sharp corners. Guys get pinched on the inside, somebody makes a mistake, rubs wheels, and then you have crashes, etc.
So our two riders at the front for Lotto Belisol and Vacances Soleil. Van den Dert, the Lotto Belisol rider. And here was that issue a moment ago, as things got congested on the corner. Katusha and Lotto Belisol, a couple of riders getting tangled up, and that was Daniel Moreno of Katusha, who was the rider in the red and white.
Moreno, a hugely important domestique, not just any domestique, but super domestique for Joaquim Rodriguez.
Liquid Gas Cannondale now, with 4 riders at the front of the peloton, with Ivan Basso up there in the front 4. A couple of riders for Lampre behind them, including Michele Scarponi. 1.5 kilometers away from the climb. Now Selvaggi, Mirko Selvaggi, the Italian for Vacances Soleil, just hovering off the front of the group. The pink jersey about 5 or 6 wheels back. Joaquim Rodriguez, his teammate Daniel Moreno trying to catch back on the tail end of the field. Now Selvaggi forges on.
It's good to be an Italian off the front in Italy, no doubt about it, as the fans really loving to see one of their own off the front, but he has a tiny advantage.
Lotto Belisol rider Dennis Van den Dert, who attacked with him, has come back. He's been caught by the field, led by Liquid Gas Cannondale. So it's just Mirko Selvaggi off the front now with 12 kilometers left to go. 1K to the summit of the climb for him. Then it's downhill for 6K before flattening out.
We're close enough to the top of this climb now that I don't think anybody has enough time on the climb to get any real distance. Giovanni Visconti going on the attack, being followed by Gatto there. But look at that. Small advantage right now. It's going to take a big advantage if they want to stay away to the finish.
An Astana and a Katusha rider responding, but not too far off the front of the field. And they're about to pick up Salvaggi here.
Well, look at Visconti. He was third yesterday, and he is bringing it here today.
Now, he's not getting much of a gap, but he's still riding hard. And Gatto is still right on his wheel in single file. And Visconti now at the front of the race, followed by Gatto. They drop the Astana rider as Lampre leads the peloton up to him.
And Visconti, the three-time Italian national road champion, including at last year's edition, so he's got that special jersey.
And Visconti riding like he has a gap. This is Graham Brown, the Rabobank, who was dropped off the back.
Brown is a very instrumental man in the lead-out on that team.
Visconti leading the way, just about 300 meters from the top of the climb now.
Look at that, best young rider, Damiano Caruso for Liquigas Cannondale, making it up to the back end of that group.
He is not dropping Oscar Gatto, though. In the bright yellow for Farnese Vini, and the peloton just a second or two behind. But this is the very front of the race right now. And there's the summit of the climb. 11K left.
I'd say that advantage is inconsequential in the overall scheme of things, so most likely they will get swept up momentarily, and it will be the shenanigans leading into what is certain to be a bunch finish, at least in my playbook.
But a technical finish that they've already seen once, because this is a circuit around the finishing town. As Visconti now leading the way on the descent for this Movistar team that ironically says that they are riding for Beñat Inciosti on the GC and not Visconti, even though he's the Italian national road champion and riding in his home Grand Tour.
Well, Inciosti is, I think, more suited for all the climbing. We saw him get a great second place a couple of days ago, the day that Domenico Pozzovivo won. And Inciosti's sitting very comfortably in 5th place right now, 52 seconds down. So good for him.
So 10 kilometers left to go on this longest stage of the Giro d'Italia. And just about everybody together, just small splits off the front of the field. Jersey slipping more towards the back of the field now. The overall leader, Joaquim Rodriguez, still looking for the red jersey of Matt Goss. Do not see him for Arica Greenedge. And typically for a sprint finish, they have come to the front by this time to set him up. So you got to be wondering how he's feeling.
Yeah, that overhead view we had moments ago, we saw back at least 40 guys, and I didn't see Gossi up in there in the top 40. It's going to be very hard for him to get up there at this point.
3K to go. The pace starts to freshen even more. NetApp has come to the front. They're on the right-hand side of the screen as Saxo Bank looks to take over control from Team Sky. So Saxo in the light colors, the team in the middle of the screen. It's Sky in the dark colors. They're now moving back to the front on the right-hand side.
And NetApp will be riding for Daniel Shorn on their team most likely, as he's the best sprinter, but they're probably outclassed in a Grand Tour field sprint.
2.5K left to go, and again is Team Sky with a firm grasp on the front end of the field. Mark Cavendish perfectly positioned right now. Mark Renshaw, number 160 run right behind Cav. It used to be the other way around. Renshaw used to be Cavendish's lead-out man when they were teammates. Now he's in a position where he has to freelance off Cav's wheel because Renshaw doesn't have a lead-out of his own.
Not a lead-out like Team Sky for Cavendish, that's for sure. And now Alessandro Ballan up out of the saddle, attacking right now as he is going big inside the final 2K.
The former world champion, not a pure sprinter, doesn't have teammates around him, but trying to attack and get a gap.
That's a gutsy move by the Italian, but it's virtually impossible to ride away when the peloton has the pedal down this hard.
Maybe he's thinking about those corners and perhaps surprising the sprinters. This is Radio Shack Nissan. Split off, Ballan giving it up, and now Team Sky coming through once again.
And that goes to show just how fast the pace is right now when a guy like Ballan can only get off the front for a couple hundred meters. Visconti now going up the left side.
Giovanni Visconti, who attacked on the climb earlier. Now he's accelerating once again as they come up on the final kilometer of racing on stage number 11. Visconti leads them into this corner where they go under the red kite. Now remember, a sharp left-handed corner followed by an even sharper right-handed turn coming up here.
Interesting that Visconti had his teammate, the stage winner a couple days ago, Ventoso, on his wheel, but Ventoso sat up and said, go!
All right, left-hand corner coming. Cavendish is back to third wheel behind two of his teammates. A very measured approach to the corner. And now they accelerate with one more corner coming, this time to the right.
Yeah, danger, everybody. Roberto Ferrari sitting about fifth wheel. Let's hope he doesn't do anything crazy.
Team Sky leading it, followed by Erika Greenedge. Cavendish's fourth wheel. Ferrari right behind Cavendish. There's that right-hand corner and another crash. Colnago goes down. Erika Greenedge.
But Cavendish is through, and it's up right now. Here comes Ferrari. He's got around Cavendish.
Ferrari just in front of Mark Cavendish, who is third wheel. Now Ferrari going for it around Erika Greenedge. Cavendish cannot respond. Roberto Ferrari has the legs. The guy who crashed Cavendish back on stage number 3 gets the win on stage 11.
Unreal. Cavendish looked like he must have slowed down in the corner. He was trying to re-accelerate a huge gear. There's Ryder Hesjedal, pink jersey from a couple of days ago, just finishing. But Ferrari, that is massive for him and his Androni team.
Now the pink jersey coming across, Joaquim Rodriguez, and like clockwork, it's a corner in the final K of a Giro sprint that causes a crash. Once again, it has been the theme throughout this Giro. Those technical corners have at least taken down a couple of different riders, and today, no different. Almost a 7-hour stage, the longest of this year's race at 258 kilometers, and it's Roberto Ferrari, the most hated man in the peloton just back in week number 1, but he's got a victory here on stage number 11. Boy, what a surprising finish on stage number 11. First the crash, which really was no surprise given the technical nature of the run-in and the crashes we've seen in similar corners so far at the Giro, but then Roberto Ferrari out-sprinting Mark Cavendish, who was well back by the end of this one.
And Cavendish third wheel right now, and he really was turning a massive gear. I think he lost more speed through that corner than he anticipated. Ferrari in a slightly smaller gear, and had a lot of pop still left to easily just dust everybody else. What a ride by him. What a victory for his team.
You guys were caught in the crash, but really this wasn't even close.
Not even close. Cavendish, Ferrari both through the corner cleanly in front of the crash. I think Cavendish just overgeared a bit.
And from Gavardo, wins stage 11, his 4th win of this season after just 2 wins last year, and he had never won more than 3 races in a single season until now. So a very good start to the 2012 campaign for Roberto Ferrari.
And considering the prestige of winning a stage of the Giro d'Italia, this is a huge win for him, as the other wins he's had this year paled in comparison in importance.
Although I don't see Mark Cavendish and Taylor Phinney helping him celebrate on the podium. Two-man breakaway that has a lead of 5.5 minutes on the main field with still over 80 kilometers left to go. It's a very short stage on this Friday in northwestern Italy. Partly cloudy day, temperature in the upper 60s. Martijn Keizer, the Dutch rider for Vacansoleil, has been joined by the 28-year-old Italian from Farnese Vini, Francesco Faili. Steve Schlanger alongside Todd Gogulski. Short, relatively flat day, and one that could end in a field sprint.
For the guys, mentally, this is a big break, because just a couple of days ago, they had a 160-mile stage. Today's day, 85 miles shorter for the guys, and they've had a couple of short days leading into this. So finally, a little bit of reprieve for the professionals in the saddle.
This is the front end of the main field. Team Sky in the dark colors. and some other teams lined up behind them. Androni, Française de Jeux, but the team of our overall race leader not setting the pace at the moment, Katusha. They have Joaquim Rodriguez in the pink jersey for the third day, as the Spaniard maintains the lead, the fifth different rider to wear the Maglia Rosa so far at this year's race.
And they tried to give it up yesterday just to relieve not only the team the burden of having to defend, but also to relieve Perito the burden of all the press obligations and so on after the race. But the Liquigas Cannondale team of Ivan Basso had different ambitions, and they wanted to keep the breakaway a little bit closer, so Perito still has to deal with all that stuff.
Steady pace in the field, still letting the brakes stretch their legs, a 5:20 lead and 80K left as we're underway on stage 13. It is a lucky stage 13 at the Giro d'Italia, starting on the Mediterranean Sea, the shortest stage of this year's race at 121 kilometers, and heading north today towards the Alps as the race continues in the northwestern corner of Italy.
A full 85 miles, shorter than the longest day at 160 miles just a couple of days ago. Pretty flat day as well, so very nice mentally for the guys to have a little bit of a down day, because the weekend, is going to be two very challenging and very selective summit finishes back to back.
Cervere is hosting the Giro for the first time ever. And the profile looks a little more ominous than it really is. Some bumpy terrain, a climb early, but it really does flatten out towards the end of the stage.
That Category 4 climb they've already gone over, and that was just sort of a little bit of an insult for the guys to start the day off, but then a lot of flatter terrain and a very likely bunch finish today.
Steve Schlanger with Todd Gogolski. We are live with under 80 kilometers left to go. This is the Androni team riding near the front of the field. We have a two-man breakaway that is up the road, leading by just about 5 minutes. Their margin has come down by 30 seconds or so from its highest point. And at the moment, the peloton not all that interested in a high-speed pursuit. Looking at the green and white team of Liquigas Cannondale, led by Ivan Basso, the team that did so much of the riding to bring the break back yesterday and keep Joaquim Rodriguez in the pink jersey when it looked like he may lose it to Sandy Cassar or Ivan Sataromita because of the huge gap they had out on the road in the breakaway. But Basso's team rode at the front, and as a result, they keep Rodriguez in pink and keep the pressure on Katusha to defend that lead.
And Katusha didn't really want to have that jersey anymore. In fact, when we first started our broadcast yesterday, that gap was still under 4 minutes to the breakaway group. And Katusha had a few guys on the front, and they were sort of toying with the idea of keeping it within range. Joaquim Rodriguez talked with his director back in the team car, Valerio Piva, and they came up with the idea that, you know what, it's time just to let it go. But it didn't happen that way. The gap got big. Liquigas Cannondale brought it back, and Katusha still has the jersey, and hence all the obligations that go with it.
As we roll into day number 13, here is the latest general classification. We still have about 10 guys within a minute of the lead. Joaquim Rodriguez on top with a 17-second margin on Ryder Hejdahl, Michele Scarponi, and Frank Schleck, two of the top names who are outside of a minute back. But this is still a race 2 weeks in where nobody has really shown their hand yet. All of the top GC riders have been conserving their energy, not attacking, as everybody is really waiting for the final week when the climbing really starts in earnest.
We haven't really seen any of the general classification men be pressed as a result of how things have played out so far, so there's all of the selection yet to come.
Here are our two leaders who are inside of 5 minutes up the row. The rider in the yellow at the front, that is the 28-year-old Italian, Francesco Faili of the Farnese Vini team, a guy who turned pro back in 2004. And he is joined by the rider from Bacan Soleil in the dark blue, the 24-year-old Dutchman Martijn Keizer, who has been in more breakaways than anybody so far at this year's race.
Oh, Keiser's been off the front before today, 346 miles, so he is leading the breakaway classification known as the Fuga Pinarello classification in the Giro d'Italia.
So many different classifications, so many goals and objectives for teams and riders. Of course, the biggest one is always the pink jersey as the race leader. But when you come to a Giro, or any Grand Tour for that matter, with almost 200 riders, you have to have those other objectives. You have to have other measurements of success. So some riders go for different classifications, other riders go for the general classification, some go for stage wins, and hey, some just look to finish the race, and that is their yardstick for success.
Yeah, absolutely. And in addition to Kaiser leading that Fuga classification, most kilometers or miles off the front, he's also leading the intermediate sprints classification, and he sits third in the combativity classification, which is different in this race than most. It's actually a combination of finish line, KOM, and intermediate sprints, where most races, the most combative classification is a subjective prize by the press.
They have some kind of benchmark, some metric to measure your progress, your success. Riders and teams look at it in different ways because everybody wants to get something out of a 3-week process. There's just too much time and effort that goes into it to not get anything out. Now the team in the white, Française de Jeu, joined by the team in the dark colors, Sky, riding at the front. Riders interspersed with one another. FDJ would be riding for their top sprinter, the youngest rider in the race, 20-year-old Arnaud Demar, and of course, and Team Sky back towards the front of the field, working to bring these two riders back into the fold, and they've got it down 4:18 right now as our two riders at the head of the race have it inside of 70K left to go to the finish. And again, the pace at the front, not all that serious. They want to keep these guys within reason. They expect a field sprint, and really, this is one of only 2 legitimate sprint opportunities left going forward into the final week. So the sprinters don't want to miss out today. So while they've given these guys a little rope, they're not going to give them too much.
Yeah, and for that matter, Katusha, with the overall race leader, Joaquim Rodriguez, will basically have to do nothing today except for protect Rodriguez's position in the peloton to keep him out of trouble. But in terms of chasing down that move, the sprinters' teams will want it so badly that they will do all the work.
Now coming up, it's going to get much more difficult. 5 major mountain stages in the last 8 days of racing. So they better enjoy these routine sprint opportunities when they can take them.
Yeah, it's 75 miles at that. Really a short day for a Grand Tour. Everything looking very comfortable today. Faili, the best placed in the breakaway at almost 44 minutes down. Kaiser is an hour and 25 minutes or 24 minutes down. So, you know, it goes to show that these different ambitions on different stages are one of the things that the riders always have to think about, and they perform their riding accordingly, depending on what's going on.
Mark Cavendish, 5th wheel from the front of the main peloton here. So he's staying very close to the front, and that's what he had his team doing the other day when he got caught up in a crash. And then also, his team didn't exactly nail the lead out on the stage that Roberto Ferrari won, and Cavendish was not happy with how it all unfolded, and he was never able to catch up to Ferrari after he got caught up in a little situation near the end. So Cav really looking to bounce back. He had targeted 6 stages that he could potentially win coming into the Giro. He has won 2, and he's been caught in some of those crashes, and it's not like he's been beaten. He's either been crashed out, he's been caught behind other riders who have hit the deck. It's not really anything where it's been his fault.
Yeah, it has.
Under 30K and under a minute for our 2 leaders ahead of this main field. Martin Kaiser and Francesco Faili have really slowed at the front of the race, and the pace starting to inch back up at the front end of the peloton. There's Kaiser there in the dark colors for Vacan Soleil, Faili in the bright yellow for Farnese Vini. A bit of a descent here, so they'll pick up a little steam. But they've lost about 15 seconds or so from the margin they had just about 2K ago.
Kaiser was in that break yesterday as well. He finished 8th on the stage, but today's break's going to put him over 400 miles in breakaways so far this race.
A lot of wind in your face.
Oh. That's a lot of work. That dude is going to be one tired man.
Today's stage finishing in the same area where they hold the semi-classic, the Grand Piemonte, each fall, which is a race that precedes the final monument of the year, the Giro di Lombardia. Riding into northwestern Italy, just south of Torino today, at the foot of the Alps. And we get into the big mountains for the first time this weekend.
Jez Hunt still on the front there, riding the tempo for Sky. And Taylor Phinney with the tall right sock on the back, that compression sock there. He's still saying he continues to get better, the body healing up.
Well, he started this Giro d'Italia by taking the win in the individual time trial, and then wore the pink jersey for the first few days of this year's race, the youngest American to ever hold the race lead at a Grand Tour. But then things got interesting. A tumultuous first week of crashes, mechanicals, just odd sets of circumstances. And Phinney really has been on the back foot since then, just trying to survive the time cut on certain days and just struggling to get through his first ever Grand Tour in his second appearance. He started the Vuelta a España last year, pulled out after the first 10 days or so, and now trying to make it through a 3-week race for the first time in his career.
And what everybody says about these Grand Tours is you have to finish one before you can start to be really competitive in one. And that's more for obviously the overall, because a lot of guys do well in the first week or two, and then they just start getting so tired that they're not able to do anything in that final week.
Frances Dijeux, the team in the white, again keeping several riders near the front. Mark Cavendish in the red jersey near the top of the screen. Of course, the dark colors of Team Sky are his squad, made up of mostly British riders, and providing the lead out for Cavendish. But it's interesting this year because Cavendish, on a new team, has 8 different riders at his disposal in this year's Giro than he had last year. So it's an entirely different lead-out group. But the one thing he has in his favor is the fact that most of them are British, and he's always been friends with them. They've ridden a lot together over the years in some form or another, so it's not a totally foreign concept to have them leading him out.
Yeah, except for the Austrian Bernard Eisel, who he obviously has brought over from the High Road squad last year. But the other dudes all new, and really lucky for Cav to have Eisel around, because Eisel is that guy that they room together. Eisel keeps him up at night because he snores like a freight train. But he has that continuity with Eisel and a lot of comfort with that.
Saxo Bank's JJ Hayedo, who went down in a crash a few days ago as well, but he's also been competitive in the sprints too. So those are the guys still in the race.
That sounds like a dozen potential sprinters.
The top sprinters for the teams that are here to win field sprints. As you see just how close the peloton is now, they're almost onto the back of our 2 leaders, Kaiser and Faili.
Today would be a perfect day for Theo Boss, the Rabobank fast man, but we just haven't seen much of him either. Renshaw says he's really feeling fatigued. Both Renshaw and Boss came from the Tour of Turkey, where Renshaw won 1 stage and Boss won 2, but that ended less than a week before the start of the Giro, and it seems like those guys are physically they don't have it right now.
And Boss had that really dramatic crash early in week number 1. He went flying into the barriers, and he has not been the same since. Renshaw has been the better of the 2 sprinters for that team, but he's now feeling the effects of 13 days of racing.
Boss, several years ago at the Presidential Tour of Turkey, was involved in a very nasty crash with the race leader, Daryl Impey, where he actually grabbed Impey's jersey inside the final 200 meters and literally lifted him up and threw him into the barricades and crashed Impey and himself, and afterwards said that he had lost his balance, of all things. And you know, a lot of people were like trying to figure out what was going on with Boss back then, but he still is learning a lot on the road. He comes from the track.
So the peloton is sweeping these boys up. Martin Kaiser and Francesco Faili, who went clear 5K in, amassed a lead of 5.5 minutes at one point. They have now been scooped up on the road. This is the front of the race with 21K left. It's where there's a small bump, the last significant amount of climbing on stage 13 of the Giro, and it's not a serious climb, just the last bump on a lumpy profile before things flatten out completely for the finish. And now Ulrika Green Edge riding for Matt Goss at the front. The breakaway caught a few kilometers ago. So this is the very front of the race, and that's the 10K to go banner.
Pretty sketchy in the peloton right there. High rate of speed, several of the big teams on the front, and lots of bad pavement as they head through town.
They come through this town, and then it gets back out onto the open roads for a short time. And the road's wider, straighter for these riders. And the thing that they'll enjoy the most is the fact that once they get down to the final 5K, it's almost straight and flat the rest of the way to the finish. Just a couple of little subtle bends, that's it, and then a few roundabouts to navigate, but nothing like what they've encountered over some of the other sprinter stages where there have been 90-degree turns in the final kilometer. Nothing like that today.
Should be pretty straightforward, but...
No. We have a Frances Dejeux rider off his bike on this corner. NetApp as well in the blue and white there in the background. So two riders on this little left-hand bend on the descent.
Well, there's any moment, there's danger around the corner. Dominique Roland, the Canadian there, and Cesare Benedetti, who has actually been, I believe, 5th place in one of the stages earlier this race.
And Roland was upset that his team car almost passed him by. So Frances Dejeux, the team that's been doing so much work at the front today, trying to set up their young sprinter, Honor Desmar. And now we get our first
and this is quite simply just because the pack is all bunched together, somebody gets pinched off, wheels rub, handlebars bang, and Dom goes down there.
And again, we mentioned it wasn't a particularly difficult climb, wasn't even rated, just a bump in the road, but a couple of technical corners on that descent. Now they're coming off it, and things will become a little bit more straightforward for the riders, and we see how the pace is picked up as it's stretched out the field here with 8K left to go. Ulrika Green Edge now controlling things at the front. Team Sky in the dark colors on the left-hand side of the screen, not too far back, and Mark Cavendish is there in the red jersey. The orange and blue, that is the team of Rabobank. Mark Renshaw will hope to factor into the sprint today. Now Team Sky trying to bring some riders up the middle of the road. Cavendish, red jersey, middle of the screen. Now following Bernie Eisel, his teammate up the left-hand side of the road. So down to 7.5 remaining. And at this point, everybody knows what's coming. So it's just a matter of positioning and patience.
Off the front, because they don't see him.
So the teams at the front. Sky for Cavendish. Farnese Vini for Guardini. Saxo Bank for JJ Hayedo. And look at Saxo Bank now bringing almost everybody to the front. They're near the bottom of the screen and now on the right.
They really just got it all lined up.
3.5K left to go. And it's going to be like this in terms of the road and the geography the rest of the way.
Maybe Hayedo really is feeling that he can challenge for the win here today. He was second to Goss way back when in stage number 3 in Horsens in Denmark.
Saxo Bank moving to the front just ahead of Team Sky. Ulrika Green Edge behind them. Cavendish is on the left-hand side of the road. In the red jersey near the bottom, Mark Renshaw of Rabobank is right behind Cavendish, and he's been trying to freelance off Cav's wheel in a few different sprints at this year's Giro when he used to be ahead of him, leading him out as a teammate. But now he knows Cav's is the wheel to follow.
And when you ever get these overheads in the sprint run-in, watch very carefully at the front and watch the guys bumping elbows and shoulders, occasionally the hand coming off the bars, pushing or just telling somebody, hey, I'm here. You'll see how aggressive it is.
Saxo Bank Everybody to the front for J.J. Hayedo. Will this pay off? Leading him under the 3K banner with Sky following. Cavendish about 11, 12 wheels back at the end of the Sky train. Matt Goss is there with them, so is Renshaw.
Hayedo really started out his career racing in the United States before he got picked up by Bjarne Riis.
There is Cavendish, making sure he is perfectly positioned. Mark Renshaw right behind him in the orange and blue.
And you saw and heard a little bit there, Cavendish barking orders to his men, telling them what to do.
He wasn't happy with the way they let out the last sprint that they contested a few days ago. He wants to make sure they get it right this time. With 2K left, Saxo Bank still at the front.
I was so busy looking at Cav, I didn't see if that was Thomas. It is. It's Geraint Thomas in front of Cavendish. Looks like they're setting him up to be the final lead-out man. That's Bernie Eisel looking back on the right side of the screen with the white glasses, looking for Cav. He's dropping back, and now he's out of it.
So Cavendish in the red jersey, Renshaw behind him, and then Matt Goss. Saxo Bank swings off to the left. Now Sky comes over the top in the dark colors. Cavendish moving up to about fifth wheel. Renshaw glued to his wheel. Goss behind him. J.J. Hayedo in the first couple of riders for Saxo Bank. Kilometer and a half to go. Mark Cavendish now fifth wheel.
4 guys in front of him with 1.2K to go. They have all the horsepower they need still at the front for Sky. This right now is Cavendish's race to lose. He's set up perfectly by his team.
There's the red kite. 1 kilometer left to go on stage 13. This is a no excuses kind of sprint for Cavendish. The team is positioned perfectly. 3 riders to lead him out inside the final K.
Oh, here comes Roberto Ferrari bumping elbows coming up behind Cavendish.
Renshaw is also still behind Cav. Ferrari moving up, so is Goss in the green colors in the middle of the road. 3 hours in, and the sprint about to be launched. Now Robbie Hunter tries to come up the middle of the road behind Goss. Orica Green Edge, the first team to really open it up. On the left side of the road near the barriers, that's where the sprint is really unfolding. Goss moving up. Cavendish about 4 wheels back. He's right behind Robbie Hunter of Garmin Barracuda. Cavendish waiting. Ferrari off to his right. Now Roberto Ferrari trying to sprint. Cavendish trying to come up the middle. There goes Renshaw. He's also coming up the middle of the road. Now Cavendish along the barriers on the left-hand side of the road. Can't find his way to the front. And Mark Cavendish gets the hat trick. His 3rd win at this year's Giro.
His team actually lost a little bit of control there when Orica Green Edge jumped him, but he got it in the end. He got that 3rd win. Good for Cav, good for Sky. Juan Antonio Fletcher there clapping his hands.
His team let it out, lost it a little in the finale, but Cavendish squeezed along the barriers on the left-hand side of the road, and it just simply came down to speed. And nobody has more than that man, Mark Cavendish, who now has the most wins in individual stages in this year's Giro d'Italia. Let's take you through that final kilometer as the sprint unfolded on stage 13.
Starts out good ensure for Mark Cavendish, 4th wheel with still 3 teammates in front, but look out up the right side. Here comes Roberto Ferrari, bumping wheels or shoulders there with Mark Renshaw on his left. Now on the right, here comes the Orica Green Edge team with Goss. Cavendish in red, still sitting 3rd on the left. Goss challenging off to his right. Cavendish sees it. Now Robbie Hunter is in front of Cavendish as well. Goss sitting 3rd wheel. Cavendish is completely isolated at this point. They've done their job. They've gotten his lead-out train disrupted. The question was, could anybody still take him? Roberto Ferrari right in front of Cav. Now Gossi jumps up the right for Orica Green Edge. Renshaw on the right, but look at Cavendish up the left side when he sees open road. It's lights out, gentlemen. Alex Kristoff coming up for 2nd. Renshaw taking
On stage 14, the first genuine mountain stage of this year's Giro d'Italia. I'm Steve Schlanger alongside Todd Gogulski. It is a cold and wet Saturday in northwestern Italy, and the field is climbing. The first of 2 Category 1 ascents in a 206-kilometer stage to Cervinia. Frank Schleck over 2 minutes back on the general classification. trying to make up time today with some of the other GC riders because this is really the first legitimate chance to take back time. And this is where the riders are. The pink line shows you that they are just about to the top of the first of the two Cat 1 climbs, a 22-kilometer long Col de Joux climb. And there are 8 riders ahead of the main field. This is the first rider on the road, Jan Barta, the 27-year-old Czech rider from Team NetApp. It was an 8-man group earlier, but on this climb it has come apart. There's now 3 different groups on the road, led by Barta, ahead of the field.
Barta here is going very big on this first big mountain day, but it's a long way to go, and now Androni has sent a man up the road from the field.
That is Jose Ruano, their GC leader. A guy who's been on the podium at the Giro before, way back in 2005, and he is the first man to attack from the peloton.
And look at that, Lampre coming up behind. They know they do not want to let Ruano get a lot of daylight. Is that Cunego on the chase there? I think it is.
Liquigas Cannondale had been leading the way at the front of the main field on this climb, trying to keep the break in check. But now the first action as they get closer to the top of the climb that officially summits with 46.1 kilometers left to go in the stage. And our leaders have quite a healthy margin of almost 10 minutes. Jan Barta, number 92, setting the pace. That's Domenico Pozzovivo, number 51 for Colnago, way back in the field, who's already won 1 stage so far at this year's Giro, and he could certainly be a favorite for today's stage, given the profile of the climbs.
Today, both of these finishing climbs are very long. They're not extremely steep, but this nasty weather, the cold legs, it's going to make it that much harder for some guys. And typically, the guys that really excel in the big mountains are smaller, thinner guys, and the cold will wear on them more.
So Cunego reeling in Ruano here. Michele Scarpone is the team leader for Lampre, but they do have a nice Plan B in Cunego, as this is Barta out front again. Coming to the top of the Category 1, Col de Joux. After 22 kilometers of climbing at 5.5%. The steepest slope was 12% much earlier in the climb. First long extended climb of this year's race as the riders today are making their way into the Italian Alps.
Barta here with a great ride on this almost 14-mile climb, but this descent that lies just out of the picture is very treacherous even on a dry road, so he's going to have to be very careful on the way down, and yet still trying to fly along to maintain that lead.
A technical and fast descent on the way to the next Category 1 that sets up our second true summit finish of the race. So this is Cunego again, responding to the attack from the field of Jose Ruano of Androni. Again, there were 8 riders in the initial breakaway that came apart on the climb. Jan Barta was the first to attack. He just went over the summit by himself. And then some others now coming across. Andre Amador of Movistar. Also Pier Paolo De Negri is in the group. Alessandro Di Marchi of Androni and Matteo Montegudi of AG2R.
Cunego finally making his way up there, but it has been a big chase for him. It's been hard to close the gap.
So Ruano, his first big acceleration of this year's race. Androni has been in a lot of moves. They picked up stage wins, but Ruano, for the first time, really showing his legs. As our leader is under the 45K to go banner and on the descent of the first of the 2 Category 1 climbs. Big day on this 3rd Saturday at the Giro is now underway. Miano Cunego. He responded to the acceleration of Jose Ruano of Androni. Now still trying to pull his way back up to Androni's rider, their team leader.
Cunego struggling just a little bit here, and it looks like Ruano is the man that's got the better climbing legs today. Cunego is one of these guys who has really been well, inconsistent on the big mountains throughout his career. Some days he's great, some days he's not. And today it looks like maybe it's shaping up to be a tough day for the Little Prince.
Well, Michele Scarponi is the team leader, so Cunego doing what he can to chase down dangerous men in the general classification when they attack on the climbs and try to keep them within reason, not let them get a lot of gap. And now we're back up to the front of the road, and Jan Barta, 27-year-old Czech rider for NetApp, who's the leader at the moment on a tricky descent.
This is going to be a very tough descent for him all the way down. You can see him totally blowing his line there and realizing it well in advance, so scrubbing off a bunch of speed and then getting back into the corner. And certainly guys in the peloton are going to be pretty scared, and it's going to be somewhat treacherous on the descent with the wet roads, but it's still a long way to the finish, so they may hold back just a little bit.
3 wins already this season. He has all of the individual victories that NetApp has collectively as a team. So Barta has really put that NetApp team on his shoulders so far in 2012.
Barta had a couple of those successes already in Italy at the Coppi e Bartali on the team time trial squad for NetApp that won that, and he also won the individual time trial as well as the general classification in that event. Cunego continuing to struggle a little bit to try and stay on the wheel of Jose Rujano, and it looks to me like he is probably not going to catch back up to him.
Damiano Cunego, former Giro winner. That was back in 2004. Since then, he's been more of a one-day type of a racer. Rujano has been able to keep Cunego at a distance. Jose Rujano, a very enigmatic rider over the last few years after he really exploded onto the radar at the 2005 Giro. He won stage 19 that year, a big mountain into Sestriere, won the King of the Mountains jersey and wound up 3rd overall. Since then, he's encountered troubled times and now trying to bounce back later in his career. The part is early. There's a bit of a descent late. And our leaders having gone over the top. And that is our man out front there, Jan Barta, and it looks like Andre Amador of Movistar is catching back on here on the descent now.
Yeah, it looked a little sketcy as he came flying by the TV motorcycle with some bobbles, but Amador throwing caution to the wind and just ripping this wet descent.
Here's Ruano.
He's really made his career out of going uphill. You can see the sleeve of the rain jacket hanging out there. A lot of times guys will actually take it off and stuff it up underneath the back of their jersey because it's too hard to get it into the pockets. But then once in a while you'll see it come out like this or even fall out into the back wheel.
Now Ruano has been saving himself over the first 2 weeks, but he says he has good legs. Just wanted to limit his losses in the first 13 days of racing, and now believes that he can be a protagonist in this final week in the mountains that suit his skill set the most.
And it's a great opportunity for him to get that rain jacket on. Also easier to get out when it's underneath the jersey rather than in the jersey pocket.
All right, so Ruano, the next over the summit. Now here comes the field, and all of the top GC riders are in that group that's at the bottom of the screen, climbing together. Ruano, the first GC man to really attack from that group. Cunego responded, and now we're back up to the second man on the road, Andre Amador.
I remember a couple of years ago, Amador was training in his native Costa Rica, and he was mugged out on the training ride, and some guys chased him. He turned down a dirt road. Cunego here in pursuit over the top, but Amador was chased down a dirt road. He dumped his bike. They chased him through the woods. They tased him. They took his bike and demanded a ransom. He finally, after several hours being unconscious, apparently in the ditch after being beaten, got out of the ditch, found his way out to the road, and he said, you know what, guys, you're not getting any money out of me. They dumped the bike, somebody found it, and returned it to him.
Sounds like a movie script.
Yeah, the legend is that he has it on his mantle as a trophy, the bike that was taken as hostage from him.
All right, so the field going over the summit of the Col d'Ajou. And they're just about a minute behind Jose Ruano. And again, he's chasing the leaders There was a group of 8 that started out riding together on that climb. They came apart on the ascent. This is again Damiano Cunego, who was moving forward from the peloton on that climb. He initially responded to an attack by Jose Ruano, but never did make it back up to him. This is Andre Amador of Movistar, and I'm thinking he may have passed Jan Barta now.
Yeah, I'm thinking he might have too, because he was flying on the descent, and Barta looked like he was struggling a little bit.
We haven't seen Barta, so it's hard to tell exactly where he is, but we believe Amador may now be at the very front of the race here on the descent. 36.5 kilometers left to go. Final climb starts with 27K remaining. So inside of 10K from the start of the final big climb today.
We're going to see a lot of these replays as guys blow it. Oh, he's trying to stay off the white line. It just makes me cringe when I see that. The white lines are so slippery.
That's the ultimate risk-reward scenario. You want to gain time, but how much will you be willing to risk on a wet day like this?
We've seen Amador on the attack on several stages, but this is the biggest lead he's had this late in the race.
Yeah, that's him passing Barta there, so that's a replay that we didn't see live earlier.
And look at him just go right on by Barta. Barta, a guy who last year at the Amgen Tour of California was the most aggressive rider overall in that race, known as the most courageous rider.
Back at the front end of the peloton, the pink jersey is up here. Joaquim Rodriguez. It is his 4th day as the overall leader of this race, but he says coming in that today is the day that he fears the most. This type of 2-climb stage, 2 very long, extended climbs that really don't suit him.
Yeah, and he likes the steeper climbs, so this is the type of terrain that he is traditionally, if he's ever had a bad day, it's been on days like this. He's also concerned about the wet roads, the potential for snow at the finish line, where temperature's only about 40 degrees for the high today.
It is the worst weather day we've had so far at this year's Giro in terms of cold temperatures and wet weather. Largely sunny and warm most of the way in the first 2 weeks.
And that weather really has been variable here through these mountains, very typical of the high mountains. You know, part of the group may see some dry roads, then rain could come in when the other part of the group is there, several minutes back on the road. So you never really know what you're going to end up with.
So Cunego chasing. The front of the field littered with GC riders. And we come into the day with the top 10 on the general classification, all within 1 minute of one another.
Cunego there just talking on his radio, telling his team, hey, I did not make it over the top with Ruano. Just want to let you guys know that. So don't think everything is okay up the road right now.
Looks like that might be Pierpaolo De Negri of Farnese Vini in the yellow. He was in that initial 8-man breakaway. He was trying to catch back on. This is the front of the race, and it looks as though Amador has been rejoined by Jan Barta, who's just behind him. So Barta passed by Amador a moment ago and now trying to get onto his rear wheel. And judging from the overhead, he was just about there.
Well, dry roads may be a little bit more to Barta's liking. It's a heck of a lot more predictable to fly down these descents when the roads are dry, but there's still a little bit of moisture, so you can see Amador trying to work his way around the wet spots. That is definitely Barta there, the second rider in our picture. But I'm not sure that the guy in front of Barta is Amador. I think that's somebody else with a rain jacket on, possibly. It's a little bit tough the way these guys are covered up.
All right, so he is behind somebody else. So Amador is at the very front of the race. Cunego still behind all of those leaders. He's between the field and the leaders. This is the front of the field. Now Astana, it looks like, taking charge for their leader, Roman Kreuziger. This is still the very wet part of the descent. So the field several minutes behind our leader, Andre Amador of Movistar, with still another Cat 1 left to go. Several minutes back, this is the peloton, led by Astana, the team of their leader, Roman Kreuziger. And many of the top GC riders are here in this field. And here they are, stacked up on the GC after 13 stages, led by Joaquim Rodriguez, who has a 17-second lead on Ryder Hesjedal. The only guys outside of a minute, Michele Scarpone and Frank Schleck. And they've all been waiting for the big mountains to come, and here they are, finally, on stage 14.
They've been waiting for these big mountains, but they have not been waiting for the rain, that's for sure. So a lot of guys really hate this kind of weather in the high mountains. Luckily, it's dried out a little bit for the descent for him, at least.
Amador on a small cobbled section with 30K to go, coming into the town of St. Vincent. So he hits the 30K banner as the leader, originally part of an 8-man breakaway. No time for blackjack today, but he is definitely doubling down on this stage because he has put in a big move to try and stay away solo and get to the base of that final climb by himself. Now, Damiano Cunego is somewhere between Amador and the field. He originally came forward from that peloton when Jose Ruano attacked. And Cunego, it didn't appear, ever really made it up to Ruano because Jose Ruano was showing some very good legs. And Cunego was almost there, but never did connect with him. All right, this is back single file with the field and Astana on the front. Astana riding for Roman Kreuziger, who was really targeted this stage. He, in fact, the week prior to the start of the Giro, rode the last 70 kilometers of the stage up to the summit finish in Cervino because the team really felt it could be a decisive day in the overall general classification. And their team leader came away saying that the profile doesn't do the difficulty justice. He said it's a lot harder on that final climb than you think because the profile shows it leveling out near the top, but he says from start to finish it's a much harder climb than the profile would indicate. We'll find out shortly. It'll start with 27 kilometers left to go, so Amador inside of 2K away from the start of that ascent. The field still snaking its way on a technical and fast ascent off the Col de Joux.
Amador is a fourth-year professional. He spent his entire career under the direction of this squad. It was Kesteparnia, but now their sponsor Movistar. He's ridden the Giro back a couple of seasons ago in 2010. Rode the Tour de France last year. He's back in the Giro this year, and he's going big with 28K to go. Unfortunately for him, it's almost all uphill to the finish.
That was the only intermediate sprint point that Amador just rode through. And we'll see who's next on the road now. Again, really hard to tell. This is Cunego, who is somewhere between the field and Amador. There were 8 riders at one point, and that break has come apart. So guys kind of scattered all over the place. There's not enough cameras and motorcycles to follow everybody. This is our second rider to come through. Behind Amador, half a minute back.
Covered up in that very distinctive black rain jacket.
Might be Matteo Monteguti of AG2R. And then the Farnese Vini rider, I believe, is Pierpaolo De Negri.
Yep, and Jan Barta. The question is who's got the black rain jacket on. We'll get a closer look at him eventually here. Amador now starting those final 27.5 kilometers, which are uphill all the way to the finish.
Our next 3 on the road. Half a minute behind Andre Amador. But a lot is going to change on this final climb. 27 kilometers long at 5.5%. Its 12% maximum comes with 10K left to go. So the Movistar rider, Andre Amador, at the front of the race on the biggest day of climbing so far at the Giro. Now past Jose Ruano, who initially attacked from the peloton. Cunego responded. He didn't initially maintain contact with Ruano. In fact, Ruano dropped him for a while, but now Cunego has passed Ruano on the road and now trying to work his way towards the front. This is behind Cunego at the front of the field, however.
And certainly, if there's one thing we've learned about Jose Ruano over the years is that he goes uphill unbelievably fast, but he goes downhill about the same speed at times, it seems. And that's an exaggeration, but he's not a great descender. Cunego is, so Cunego got the better of him on that descent.
Pink jersey, black rain jacket on, but he's near the front.
There you go. There's confirmation. It is Monteguti at that intermediate sprint, so he's in the chase group.
So our leaders are now on the lower slopes of the final climb, the Cervinia. That's 27 kilometers long. The pink line shows you that they are right at the very bottom, and it's a long way up. 5.5% with a maximum of 12% coming 10K from the finish. Cunego coming through the town here, trying to bridge across to those leaders. And we don't exactly know how far back he is at this point. Back to the front of the field.
Maybe we'll get lucky and Italian television will give us a graphic as to where he is at that intermediate sprint.
Looks like he's still riding pretty well. So he may be taking back some time. Astana, with a lot of guys coming to the front for Roman Kreuziger. Really the first time in the race Astana has taken control like this. Cunego at the 30K banner. Still hasn't reached that intermediate sprint point, so he's still several kilometers behind the leaders. Single file for the field now. Coming into town after they've come off the descent of the climb now.
One thing for sure that we have to look at today is the tactics of Astana. Giuseppe Martinelli, the director for that squad, says that Kreuziger is going to have to start attacking not just once, but a lot of days from here on out if he wants to win this race overall.
Now this is at the very front. Our leader, Andre Amador. And you can see it looks like the roads have dried up and the sun is peeking through. 25K left to go. He attacked back on the descent of that last climb, the Col de Joux, past Jan Barta, who had been the lone leader, and now Barta in a small chasing group. But Amador, the lone leader here, a guy who's been in more than one breakaway at this year's race. And this is a long, lonely road to the finish. All uphill. Now the field at 30K, so they're not all that far behind Cunego. As Amador has a conversation with the team car.
Amador's never had a professional win. He was the winner of the prologue of the Tour de l'Avenir. That's an under-23 race. But he has never had a big pro win in his career. That last win came in 2008. He's a guy who finds himself usually in a supporting role, which is exactly why he's in this break today. It's to help his teammates out, but then he found an opportunity, so he's taken it.
So the chase, the peloton about 9 minutes behind Amador right now. And what do you think that conversation was with the team car?
Don't blow yourself up at the bottom. You have a 17-mile climb staring you in the face, and hold on as long as you can.
Now Cunego at the sprint point. So without getting official time gaps, it looks like Cunego is closer to the field than he is Amador at this point.
I think that's very true. I think he's a few kilometers behind Amador and maybe a kilometer in front of the field at the most.
Okay, so this is our chasing group that includes Monagudi, Pierpaolo De Negri of Farnese Vini, and our leader, Andre Amador. Slowly trudging uphill. The second Category 1 of the day and the second summit finish of this year's race.
Today has really gone the way I expected it to, Steve. The first big climb, the Col de Joux, too far from the finish, not steep enough for any of the real general classification guys to take a big chance. Obviously, Cunego went on the attack, but he was following Rujano, and he's just tried to capitalize on that now.
All right, top of the screen, Amador, our leader. As the helicopter pulls back, there's the chasers, that four-man group we talked about, that is inside of a minute back, led by Matteo Monagudi, followed by Jan Barta, Alessandro Di Marchi, and Pierpaolo Longo.
So let's break down this climb just a little bit. This thing goes 4,800 vertical feet. It tops out at 6,500, but 4,800 vertical feet. Amador definitely is going to feel every single one of those feet as he grinds his way up this climb. A total of 16.7 miles in length, and that's following the Col de Joux, which they climbed with 4,100 feet of vertical. So just these two climbs, a lot of altitude gained.
Jan Barta, who's in the blue and white of NetApp there, was the first man to attack from the day's original 8-man breakaway on that first climb. He was eventually caught and passed by Amador. Barta hooked up with these other three. As you see the official gaps now, this chasing group has slipped back to over a minute behind Amador. Cunego is inside of 8 minutes back on the road. So Barta hooked up with these other three riders, but Amador still at the front of the race with 22K left.
Yeah, Barta first over the Col de Joux, but on the descent, he was having a little bit of trouble on the rainy, wet, slick corners. Meanwhile, Amador was absolutely riding like a man possessed as he was bailing down or just diving into every corner.
So Damiano Cunego here, just over a minute ahead of the main field. So he hasn't really gotten much time since that attack earlier. And he's been out there by himself for a while now, but just hasn't gained much ground on the leaders, while the peloton has really kept him within reason. They haven't let him get too far up the road.
Ones you're talking about there.
These are team leaders.
any number that ends in a 1 is almost always going to be the team leader. And Cunego looks like he's going to be joined by an Euskaltel rider as well as a Movistar rider.
Oh, coming up behind Damiano Cunego, who never got more than just a couple of minutes over the main field. He's always stayed closer to the peloton than he was to the leaders. And they're not quite up to him. And again, this is Di Marchi, the rider you're looking at in the middle of your screen, who was with the three other chasers, second on the road a moment ago, and now the birthday boy here is solo second.
He wants to celebrate, and definitely this chase group is tearing itself apart. Jan Barta, the Czech rider, should be the next one coming into your screen. There he is. But Di Marchi has got a little better climbing legs right now than Barta, even though Barta was first over the top of the last climb.
All right, so Cunego has been joined here.
I think that's Amos Chiruka there for Euskaltel.
And a Movistar rider. Settling in just behind Cunego now. Chiruka loves the breakaways. Typically he gets in earlier breaks. But now, coming forward from the field at some point, as we move back to the front of the peloton, Liquigas Cannondale now taking charge, with Michele Scarpone of Lampre moving up to the tail end, behind Ivan Basso. And then it's Astana, Radio Shack, and Androni. And then the pink jersey, number 111, Joaquim Rodriguez.
Quite interesting to see this playing out exactly like Rodriguez's director, Valerio Piva, was telling me just yesterday. He expected on this climb it was going to be Liquigas setting the tempo, trying to put everybody else into trouble, trying to hurt Rodriguez on this very long climb, which typically is not a type of distance he likes for a climb.
Today was the day that Rodriguez says that he feared the most. 2 long, steady, grinding climbs, not the short, punchy, explosive climbs where he really excels. But Rodriguez says that he's been working more on these longer climbs. He is getting better. And the man they're all chasing at the moment is Andre Amador. Cranking away.
And he's pretty happy with the way the race has gone so far because he hasn't lost all that much time. With Chiruka there, it looks like actually Marzio Bruzzaghini, the Italian on the Spanish Movistar team. And Cunego now riding in the third wheel behind those guys.
So Cunego finally getting some support as he was by himself for a while, but look how close the field is. So Damiano Cunego, former Giro winner, never got as far in front of this field as he probably anticipated once he had passed Rujano, who's been picked up by this group. And they're just slowly reeling him in. Third wheel there in the white jersey, best young rider, Damiano Caruso. Ivan Basso, after a slow start to the season, trying to find form here at his beloved Giro. That's Bruzzaghini in the middle, in the dark colors for Movistar, Chiruka in the orange for Euskaltel, and then Cunego in the pink. Now Chiruka kind of looking over the guardrail there to see how far everybody was behind. And Jan Barta who was, for a moment, our lone leader back at the top of that last climb, the Col de Joux. And now it looks like our three chasers here have picked up some other riders. So we have Cunego at the front, followed by Amit Chiruka, then Marzio Bruzzaghini. We had a Lotto Bellisol rider, Omega Pharma Quickstep. Here's the front of the field coming to the 20K banner, led by Liquigas Cannondale. Jose Ruano, number 21, has worked his way to the front. And there's the pink jersey. Joaquin Rodriguez staying close. Over 8 minutes behind our leader. To under 15K left to go to the end of stage 14. Summit finish at Cervinia today. Damiano Cunego leading Marzio Bruzzaghini. And they are just ahead of this field. The peloton single file. And about to pull them in. Jan Bakelant's the rider for Radio Shack Nissan as well. And here goes Bruzzaghini on the move.
Bruzzaghini going on the attack. The Radio Shack man there is one who had been in the breakaway, Nelson Oliveira, the Portuguese rider. He's being swept up now with Cunego, and it's looks like our best young rider on the front for Liquigas.
Damiano Caruso leading them. And it's Ivan Basso at the back end of the train. Lampre has it lined up, so does Katusha right behind them. So there's 7.5 minutes behind our leader Amador. 15K left to go. So the pace, pretty steady now. You see how it's stretched out on this climb. They still have not hit the steepest part, though. That comes with 10K to go when it kicks up to 12%. And there's actually a 3K stretch that starts in there where it averages 8%. Right around that area with about a dozen K left to ride.
DeMarchi here, still trying to make his way up to Amador. But last check we had, he was over a minute back. The question is, has Amador overextended a little too early? Jan Barta still in the fight. And Caruso right there up out of the saddle on the front. He has big goals. He actually says he wants to ride into Milano in that Best Young Riders jersey, still while doing all this work for Ivan Basso. But lurking only 8 seconds behind him in the battle for Best Young is Rigoberto Urán, and 25 seconds back is Sergio Henao, both the Colombians on the Sky team. They're not having to set the tempo, so that's probably going to hurt Caruso's chances mightily.
Now back to our leader, Andre Amador. Remember, he attacked and passed Jan Barta on that last climb, the Col de Joux. And ever since that pass, he's been out front by himself. He's leading DeMarchi by half a minute here.
Ooh,
and this
so
has
it's
been
come
a
down.
long time. Yeah, it's been a long time that he's been out there with this solo lead.
He's starting to come apart right now. If DeMarchi is half that distance, this does not look nearly as good for Amador to get the stage win. One of these guys could easily get the win, but Amador may not be the man. Barta continues to not give up. Look at him. He has been half a dozen seconds behind DeMarchi now for several kilometers as they're both closing in on Amador.
Now we just saw Amador at the top of the screen. There he is. There's the Italian just below him. And then Barta is just behind him. He has caught Andre Amador at the front of the race. Time for a snack with 11K left to go. These are the first two on the road.
Let the gamesmanship begin as DeMarchi having a little look over there at Amador. Now getting just one bite out of that food. And it looks like they are going to ride together for a bit here. Certainly the speed is high enough on this climb. Drafting will make a difference. It will be much harder for not only Barta to catch them, but the field if they work together.
Now they're making their way up this final climb, the Category 1. 27 kilometers in total. They've covered a lot of that already. And they're into a stretch now where it's getting to its steepest. A 3K stretch that averages 8%. At 10K to go, it hits its maximum slope of 12%. 5 hours already on the bike. And after this very steep section, it levels off somewhat to back around 5% up until the final 2.5 kilometers when it hits its easiest gradient at under 2%.
Back here in the peloton, it's still all Liquigas Cannondale setting the tempo on the front. We've seen Damiano Caruso, we've seen Valerio Agnoli. Now we're seeing right behind the front Sylvester Schmid waiting to light things up for Ivan Basso.
So Amador had been by himself for so long. Do you think part of it is demoralization that he's finally been caught, and maybe a little relief that he finally has some help? Mixed emotions? What do you think he's feeling?
Yeah, I think that's probably the case. Although with this gap, he probably was wondering, could he hold on from the field by himself and get his first ever big pro win? But always right behind him, he had DeMarchi coming up, and so I think that he kind of knew it was inevitable.
A little conversation between the two. Maybe a happy birthday wish from Amador.
Yeah, DeMarchi's like, thanks, buddy. Now you just need to give me the stage win to really cap it off.
I'll buy you a cake if you give me the victory. All right, so back down the road, Jan Barta is next, currently in third place, and then 6.5 minutes back. Here's the field.
So this field here is where that general classification battle is waiting to really become embroiled. Agnoli on the front there, Barta here sitting third on the road, trying to get up to the two front runners. And you got to hand it to him for his tenacity. He has really put himself through a lot here to try and catch these guys.
Our two leaders just a half minute ahead of Barta. Now DeMarchi comes to the front. Now both of these guys were in a breakaway of 8 riders much earlier in the stage. That came apart on the first Category 1. Jan Barta was the first man over that summit, out front by himself. Amador passed him, and DeMarchi, who had been dropped, slowly reeled back in. Our leaders passed Barta, and just recently regained contact with Amador at the front of the race. Now 10K banner for the field, and the gap coming down now in chunks at 5.5 minutes with 8.5 kilometers left for these two. First significant day of climbing at this year's Giro d'Italia. 2 Category 1s, summit finish, both climbs in excess of 20 kilometers in length. That's Amit Charuka, who was on the move earlier, but he's been caught by a group.
That's exactly what you were talking about as well, Steve. You make those moves, you go on the attack, you put yourself into a world of hurt, and you can't recover from it on a sustained climb like this. Giovanni Visconti, the 3-time Italian national champion there, just going out the back as well, and a lot of damage being done right now as these guys in that steeper part of the mountain now. There's Hejdahl, weight of a nation rider there, as he spent several days in the pink jersey. Now sitting very close, just 17 seconds down in the general classification.
Michele Scarpone just behind the pink jersey of Joaquim Rodriguez.
And Roman Kreuziger in front of him. Tirolongo there. 2 spots in front of Tirolongo is Basso.
The race's best young rider is the very front in the white jersey, Damiano Caruso of Liquigas Cannondale. Kunigal also picked up at the front end of the field. So all of the top general classification riders together, over 5 minutes behind the leaders.
Up to him. He has been dying 1,000 deaths on this climb, and he's still fighting.
He was first over the initial Category 1 climb, was passed by Amador, lost contact, but now it's been a long process, and he has eventually, finally reeled them back in, and he is back to the front of the race.
Unreal ride by the Czech rider for NetApp, and don't forget, this guy has had some nice wins already this year. He is a fighter.
Now this NetApp team said they wanted to ride aggressively at this year's race, and they've done just that. This is back again to the front of the field, Basso's second wheel.
Things are heating up a little bit now with Schmid coming to the front.
Well, the gap to the leaders have been dropping really in chunks. And what will also further determine whether or not they stay away is if anybody finally attacks from this field. Haven't seen that yet.
If the goal of the field, if everybody said, okay, this is the last day of the race and one of those guys up there was going to win the overall, the field would bring them back. But because of the tactical battle going on within the general classification guys in the field, that's what's going to give that breakaway the potential. But when you see Schmid coming to the front, look at him winding things up. He is an incredible domestique in the mountains.
Got his team leader Basso right behind him. 4:23 to the 2 leaders with 6.5K left to go. Everybody just marking each other right now, nobody attacking. Again, no time bonuses at the finish today. So for a guy like Joaquim Rodriguez, who you see in the middle of the screen there, number 111 in the pink jersey, he can just ride defensively to protect that jersey. He doesn't have to worry about those attacks or any riders up the road to take back time on bonuses.
Yeah, just finish with them, get the same time, or even if they get a couple of seconds. You know, there are not many guys that are close. Hejdahl's at 17 seconds. And then Paulo Tiralongo at 32. Kreuziger at 52. So those are relatively big gaps.
And to burn guys off his wheel, but the top marquee riders, those around him on the GC, they are hanging right there.
Look at that. Denegri straight through the peloton from off the front in the break to right out the back of this pink jersey group. So it's Schmid, Basso, Tiralongo, Kreuziger, Scarponi, Rodriguez in pink. Then behind Rodriguez is Hejdahl. Then behind Hejdahl, Cunego.
Joaquim Rodriguez in the pink jersey on the day that he was really worried about, but he's held serve. Just ahead of rider Hejdahl, who was just ahead of Cunego. Off to their left, Frank Schleck. Behind them, Domenico Pozzovivo.
Speaking of Pozzovivo, very interesting, I thought, to hear a quote from Schmid, the man on the front. He said that the stage that Pozzovivo won, that was stage number 8 a while back. He said, you know, I was riding a pretty hard tempo on the front, but we probably could have caught him had we wanted to. The deal was he was down in the general classification, and we decided, you know what, it was better not to go crazy and risk blowing ourselves up and isolating Ivan there.
Well, looks like Barta is struggling here.
Oh.
Losing contact and now trying to pull himself back up to the 2 leaders. Amador and DeMarquis.
Looks like Amador maybe with a little bit of a surge because DeMarquis is also was slightly gapped. Now they're closing back up. DeMarquis going to the right, maybe a counterattack. That's Thomas de Hent there on the right for Vacances Soleil. Those are all the guys at the front we just ran through a moment ago.
It's been all Liquigas Cannondale the whole way up this climb, setting the tempo. All right, so Barta again has pulled himself back up on the pedals, trying to hang tough, sitting behind the other 2, but he's clearly struggling.
Yeah, you could say that again.
Hoping to ride into form in the first 2 weeks, and he's looked pretty good. And especially today, he's remained at the front, supported by his team, and in contention to win his 3rd Giro. Amador setting the pace, and it's a slow one, with these 3.5 minutes ahead of the Basso-led peloton.
As they climb higher and higher into the altitude, they're also getting up into the clouds. This is another Androni rider.
That's Jose Ruano again. Remember, he attacked earlier. It was Cunego who responded. Ruano was eventually passed by Cunego.
On the downhill, but he loves the uphills.
Well, this is his 2nd time attacking from the field today.
And we'll see how good Schmid's legs are, and it looks like they're very good. Ruano not getting any time whatsoever over the pole there.
Now, we haven't seen any of the other GC riders doing this, but Ruano has done it twice today.
Ruano 305 down, so a little bit further down in the general classification, maybe hoping that they'll give him a little bit of rope and he could slip away.
Yep, back up, closer to 4 minutes now to our 3 leaders, and Ruano has just been slowly grabbed and pulled back in. by the tempo of Liquigas. The final 3.5. Now Tiralongo working at the front. Hejdahl responding.
Tiralongo is a huge asset to Kreuziger because Tiralongo's very high up in the GC. Look at this. Hejdahl responds.
Hejdahl sitting second wheel. There's Cunego and Ruano, and they're off the back.
Wow.
They were off the front of the field earlier. And now the Colnago acceleration.
That is not their team leader.
No, that's
Gianluca Brambilla. He's being matched by a rider for Euskaltel. And now at the front, rider Hejdahl sitting up, swinging off, saying, I'm not going to tow you guys.
And not all that concerned about these two at the moment. The other GC riders just marking one another. Brambilla sitting second wheel here, the Italian for Colnago. It was his teammate, Pozzovivo, who won last week. And that is the team leader, Mikel Nieve, the Spaniard for Euskaltel, who has launched his first move of the Giro.
Well, Nieve was sitting at the very last position when they started this climb, caught my attention then. Obviously, he's had the legs to move all the way up past Brambilla, and now Hejdahl goes with him.
So it's rider Hejdahl past Brambilla and getting onto the back of Mikel Nieve.
This is why I did not expect to see Ivan Basso going to the front like that. He was isolated, he put himself on the front, the other guys could get a draft. Now they've started to attack him, and Hejdahl is really high in the GC, 17 seconds behind Rodriguez.
He is sitting in second place. Nieve, meantime, 3.5 minutes down. Nieve won a stage at last year's Giro d'Italia.
Daniel Moreno on the front there for Katusha for Rodriguez.
Still have Tiralongo, Kreuziger, the pink jersey of Joaquim Rodriguez, but they're a few seconds behind these two. Hejdahl for Garmin Barracuda and Nieve in the orange for Euskaltel.
Look at rider Hejdahl, the Canadian. He is making a huge move right here. Could he possibly put himself back into pink on this ride?
Hejdahl, one of 5 men to wear the pink jersey so far in the first 2 weeks of this year's race. They're 1.5 minutes behind our 3 leaders, inside of 3K to go, and Hejdahl is dropping Nieve.
Look at rider Hejdahl. The man picked up his first ever Grand Tour stage in the Vuelta. Now, he has been riding 3 days earlier this race in the overall race lead, and he's looking to try and get it back.
He sees there is an opportunity here. There's no time gaps at the finish, but a physical gap, the way he is riding, could potentially move him back into the race lead today.
It definitely changes the complexion of the finish of these races without those time bonuses. There's no doubt about it.
Well, Hejdahl has always said that he's at his best in the 3rd week of a Grand Tour. We are just starting week 3, and that's 3K to
Rodriguez.
go as Joaquim Rodriguez now.
Rodriguez, he knows it's dangerous, and look at this. Rodriguez has survived the day that he thought was going to be a huge challenge to him. He's going up the road.
Trying to get across to Hejdahl. That's Nieve first in the orange. He's going to go by him.
See you later, Mikel Nieve.
And just over 1 minute back now to the 3 leaders. 2.5 kilometers left to go. So Joaquim Rodriguez riding to preserve that pink jersey. He's dropped the other GC riders. Now it's just Hejdahl in front of him. This is not his type of finish, but he is on the attack. Michele Scarponi is the rider for Lampre there in the pink and blue.
Well, most of the leaders now are isolated. They mostly don't have teammates to help them.
Now it's Scarponi leading this group. Basso is there.
Look at this. Scarponi's closing it down to Rodriguez. But it looks like Hejdahl still hanging on with a bigger gap.
So this is Hejdahl up here. And he is really trying to accelerate to stay away from Joaquim Rodriguez, who is trying to reel him in. Now just behind Michele Scarponi, about to get back onto the rear wheel of Joaquim Rodriguez. He's got Basso with him. Rigoberto Urán is also there for Team Sky. And Sergio Henao as well, so 2 Sky riders.
Both of those Colombians are now at the back. Urán sitting third wheel on the left side of your screen there. Rodriguez slotting in behind him. Scarpone, he knows Hejdahl's a danger man. So does Basso. In fact, so do every one of those guys.
Here is Hejdahl, still riding pretty well. Just over a half minute behind our leaders with under 2K now left to go to the summit finish.
And it's just flattening out a little bit here. Hejdahl getting the TT motor going, chasing these three men at the front.
Can they survive? The final 2.5 kilometers flatten out to under 2%. This is the most gentle gradient of the entire climb. So Demarquis, Amador, and Barta still at the front on the left. Amador coming to the front. There goes Domenico Pozzovivo of Colnago at the top of the screen.
That's a guy they also have to watch very closely. Remember, if somebody else makes it up to Hejdahl like Pozzovivo, then Hejdahl has a little bit of help to trade pace. So Scarpone being vigilant right now.
Now Demarquis at the front, racing towards the red kite in the final kilometer. Barta behind him and then Amador third.
Oh, this is getting really catty up here in the breakaway as these guys attacking the heck out of each other.
This is where it's really flattened out, and now they're looking around, but Hejdahl might not be too far behind.
Look at Barta. He looks like he's about to vomit. The guy is so twisted. He has killed himself. Can he get the win? His team general manager, Ralph Dank, told me the team had exceeded all expectations days ago.
So it's flat. They're inside the final kilometer. With the team cars there, it looks like Hejdahl is probably far enough back. He won't factor in now. It'll be between these three for the stage win. There is Ryder Hejdahl.
Oh, what a fantastic ride for Hejdahl. He's going to get fourth on the day. Can he get the 17 seconds he needs over Rodriguez to get into pink?
The other GC riders back here, Iran, Haynau, Scarpone, Kreuziger, Basso, the pink jersey of Joaquim Rodriguez. And now here they come inside the final half K. Demarquis in front. Now Amador moving up into second position in the dark for Movistar. Now here goes Amador on the left around the barricades. So it's Amador, Demarquis, and Barta in that order. 5.5 hours, 2 Category 1 climbs, and it all comes down to this for the stage win.
And out of these three, only one guy has a professional win, and that's Barta, and here he goes.
Jan Barta going for it. After a big struggle all day long, Amador coming around on his right-hand side, and it's going to be Andre Amador, his first ever Grand Tour stage win.
His first ever professional win for Amador. What a gutsy ride, but look at Hejdahl. Can he get enough of a gap to go back into pink?
He will finish fourth. And then what will the gap be to the pink jersey of Joaquim Rodriguez? Huge effort by Hejdahl. And now the clock starts. 21 seconds behind the leaders is where Hejdahl crossed. He had a 17-second lead on Rodriguez as the day started, or I should say Rodriguez had the lead on him by 17 seconds.
So we're looking for about 38, 39 on the clock, and it looks like Hejdahl gets it. He's going back into pink.
Ryder Hejdahl riding back into the pink jersey today. Tirolongo comes across. The pink jersey crosses. Basso, Scarpone, Oran, and Haynau. But the big story is Ryder Hejdahl moving back into the pink jersey for the second time at this year's race.
I think Ivan Basso was a little bit overconfident there. He set himself up for those counterattacks, and that cost him and the other GC men that very good move by Hejdahl.
Now another group of 5 coming across, over a minute back. Ryder Hejdahl with that big acceleration in the final kilometers of the final climb. Damiano Cunego coming across in this group. He was active earlier in the stage, but losing time to the other GC riders today. So what a finish on the summit in Cervinia. Andre Amador wins the stage, and Ryder Hejdahl goes back into pink. This was the finish. Jan Barta going for it in the closing 200 meters. But after such a fight all day long, he just did not have it left in the legs as Andre Amador came around him, and the Movistar man, the Costa Rican, gets the stage win on the 14th day at the Giro.
That may very well be the first ever Grand Tour stage victory for a Costa Rican as well, but it's Amador's first pro win. And man, he did it the hard way in the break all day. Had to survive that break, but then Hejdahl, what a gutsy ride as he dropped all the other general classification contenders in his bid for pink, and he got it.
Amador of Movistar, the 25-year-old from San Jose, Costa Rica. Biggest day of his career, winning stage 14 at the Giro d'Italia. He carried the flag for Costa Rica at the opening ceremonies of the Pan Am Games last year. And now celebrating on the summit finish of Trevino. And a change atop the general classification. Ryder Hejdahl back into the pink jersey for the second time in this year's race, now leading Joaquim Rodriguez by 9 seconds after 14 days. The first Canadian to ever lead the Giro d'Italia, now leading it for the second time in this year's race, the 31-year-old from British Columbia.
I think with his Garmin Barracuda team, guys like Peter Stetina, Christian Van de Velde, they're going to do it tomorrow. They're going to probably hold it into the rest day after stage 15, and they're going to have the rest of next week to think about holding on to it. But what a day for Garmin Barracuda. What a day for Canada.
Hejdahl in his third Giro says that he is at his best in the third week of a Grand Tour, and that's the territory we are entering now. It's going to be a hard one. All of the top mountains at this year's race coming up in this final week.
Hejdahl has shown for several years now that he's been knocking on the door of potentially winning a Grand Tour. He's a long way from winning it, but he's the first Canadian ever to be in the pink jersey, and he has flown that Canadian flag very highly.
He changed his early season program to be better in the month of May to lead this Garmin Barracuda team at the Giro. He's known he was going to be the team leader since way back in November. So a lot of time to think about it, and now his second spell in the Maglia Rosa.